What is up, everybody? We say hello to the group. To the group. Today's the day we go to Alcatraz. And I'm very with my best friend Taylor. And I'm gonna document it for the channel, of course, because you guys need to know what is going down. Unless you've already been, then in that case, you don't have to watch this video. But if you want to, re-enjoy, because we got like VIP, or it's like the ultimate tour or something. It's called something like that. And so we get to see places that no one else gets to see. So I'm really fucking excited. I can't fucking wait. And let's fucking go. And then let's go. We have made it onto the boat. Now let's make it to the island. Feels rough. Filming like this from now on. My lashes came off. The wind, not me. So I look like a crackhead, but I'm not. She's gone, and it's windy, and it took my lashes away.
If I should give them to you or Carly.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. The night tour and the behind the scenes connected. So the behind the scenes is 2 hours, and then you go into the night tour, where we will have the Cell House audio tour. We'll have some live programs, and that'll be a lot of fun. But if you stay for the night tour, your first boat where you will be able to leave the island is going to be at 8:40. And I understand that sometimes people cannot stay to 8:40. We also have a second night tour boat at 9:25. I'm not expecting to see y'all at 9:25. Totally fine. But if you need to leave the island earlier, we do have the last day tour boat, which is going to be at 6:30, which Ranger Carly, our assistant here today, she will be getting on that boat, so she will walk you down to that boat. So just let me or Ranger Carly know if you're going to be taking that 6:30 boat. So the story of Alcatraz is a story of history in layers. So Alcatraz is named Isla de los Alcatrazes by the Spanish in 1775 when they first discovered the San Francisco Bay. It means island of the pelican, which we have 2 fake ones right there looking over us. So before European habitation, this was Ohlone land, Ramaytush Ohlone land. They never really used Alcatraz because originally there was no dirt, there was no water, it was just birds. And they didn't really find a use for that. Then the Spanish came and they also agreed with the Ramaytush Ohlone. There's no fresh water, there's no dirt, it's just a bird-covered rock. They're gonna leave it alone. And then after the Spanish came, California was controlled by Mexico. And then after the Mexican-American War, California was controlled by the United States. That happened in 1848. Another big event that happened in 1848, gold rush. And the United States realized, oh, we need some people out there to make sure that no one comes in and tries to claim our gold for themselves. Because anyone with the Navy could have done it. Spain, France, England, Russia, anyone really. And they're like, no, that's our gold. So they built forts in the San Francisco Bay area to make sure that their gold is secure. So we have the birds, this red brick here is those forts, that Civil War fort era. And then after the beginning of the Civil War, they realized that if we put prisoner soldiers out here, they can build the whole island for us. We don't have to pay them. That's where we get the next couple layers, because those were barracks. And then, after 1933, there was a new owner, the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And this became USPS Alcatraz. And again, up there, that's where the correctional officers lived with their families. And then after 1963, shut down, to become abandoned government property, which is when we have our Indians of all tribes came out here and occupied the island for 18 months. That's where we get our, well, Indians welcome, Indian land. They occupied this land 19 months. It was actually the start of the Native American Civil Rights Movement. Well, the start of the more popularized, more visible Native American Civil Rights Movement. And then after the occupation, that's when the National Park Service stepped in and made it a park that everyone can come and enjoy, and that's why you guys are here today. So we're gonna be going through all that history, and then we'll go into deep dives in every single spot. Ready to go?
Yeah.
All right, let's get started.
Ooh, the old car. Looks like a big castle.
The building that we're standing in is the Sally Port, and it is the oldest building on Alcatraz. So this building was built to be a first line of defense if invaders ever made it onto the island. Now, Alcatraz was put into a ring of fire. It was built as a set of 3 forts. 2 of those were completed. Alcatraz and Fort Point under the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. There was supposed to be another one on the other edge of the Golden Gate in Marin. And it would be if any enemy ships came through, they would get blasted from both sides. And if they came into the bay, and they managed to survive that long, they would get blasted from all sides from Alcatraz. Because Alcatraz had a ring of over 100 cannons, plenty. But if those brave men managed to make it onto the island, and they would come up this very way, here would be the first line of defense. Now, what we're standing on used to be a drawbridge. The plan was, if anyone ever made it onto the island because they did not want to be on, they would either keep the drawbridge lowered or have it open up so that they could first blast them with these, where the cannons would be. And they would slam you with a thing called grape shot, which is basically, if you know what bird shot is or buckshot is, it's that big. It's built for ripping through humans. Basically human shot. Not very pleasant. But if people managed to survive that, they would open down that drawbridge, let people in here to the middle with the other bridge on the other end up. They would bring the drawbridge back up, they would open the gun slits and just open fire upon the men. Quick and efficient way to kill a lot of people really, really quickly. Luckily, Alcatraz never fired a single shot of anger, so it was largely obsolete by the time it had finished being built. But the thing was about Alcatraz is that they were having a hard time keeping the men on the island to do the work. Originally, they brought out bricklayers and stonemasons. They would pay them $100 a day. And they would keep them there for a week, and then on their weekend, they'd bring them over to San Francisco. Come Monday morning, how many people think showed up to work? Everybody went to the gold fields to try their luck. So, Alcatraz realized pretty quickly that if you got prisoners out here doing the work, they can't leave. You don't have to pay them. Your job gets done a lot faster. So originally, the prisoners started being people from San Francisco, because after the gold rush, San Francisco went from a town of 400 to a city of 40,000. From a town of 400 to a city of 40,000, and there was no official police force at that time. There were a lot of vigilante groups, like a group of men who called themselves the Bat Men, which was regular citizens who would go out in large clubs and just start hitting people. Obviously, that did not prove effective. So the U.S. Army was told, hey, you gotta go put some law and order into that city. So if someone got shot in the middle of Market Street, the army would show up, round up everybody in the immediate vicinity, bring them on back to Alcatraz, and put them underneath this building here at Alcatraz. We do have a lovely diagram right here. Originally, it had just been used for soldiers caught drunk on duty, who were cheating at cards, something like that, not following orders. But then it kind of devolved into, oh, we need a lot of people to put in there. Now, there were no beds, there was no light, there was only one way in and out, which was a rope ladder that they would let down to put people in and then roll back up. And you could not even try to climb your way up and break yourself out because on top of the trap door, they would put the cannon. You were not getting out there. So people got really, really sick, and then they realized it's probably not the best way to be holding people. They need to build on-purpose prisons. So I'm going to show you where they put the first on-purpose built prison. But as we walk underneath here, take a look at the original Nichols right here, Alcatraz Island, 1857. So you can take a look in both these doorways. Get a feel for how small that original prison was. All right, so this brick foundation behind me, this was the original foundation for that original prison. It stretched from the end of this building all the way to the beginning of where that building now stands. It was built out of wood. It burnt down a couple of times, not on purpose. It just kind of burnt down sometimes. And then they realized, we probably should not be putting inmates inside a burnable prison, so why don't we build that cell house up at the very top of the island? So the inmates built their own prison, which does not seem like a fun time. Actually, prison labor built everything on this island. The roads, the buildings, the seawalls, everything. Really interesting when you think about it. All right, let's move. We're going to move to one of our first behind the scenes places. All right. Right here was once the print shop during the military era. Now, who would you put working in a print shop out of the incarcerated soldiers? Forgers. And they had this man, he was a forger. He was sent here to Alcatraz. They sent him to work here at the print shop. What do you think he printed on his first day of work? Not money, his release papers. He slipped them into the outgoing mail, waited a couple of weeks. The commanders came down and was like, congratulations, you're being released. They gave him $10, a set of civilian clothes, and gave him a ride over to San Francisco. That man was never seen again. During the military era, it was very common for men to escape. It was minimum security, and they knew that these men weren't violent offenders at the time. So, as we can see, we have a tunnel here. Originally, this building was not here. This is the power plant. originally it was just a battery with a cannon. And on the other end of this tunnel was another battery. So these tunnels were built, communication tunnels were built, so that men could get from one side of the island to the other in case someone showed up and they needed a fire and they managed to get around. And this is what the cannons would look like. Very large, so they couldn't be moved. But then after it stopped being a fort, they built the power plant here. It was just an easy way to get to the power plant where they were burning bunker oil. And they burned that until the federal years. But during the federal years, behind me, where we're going, is where they put one of the industries building where the men were sent to work. So they realized they could not have a tunnel here. So they blocked it up, forgot about it. It became a myth, a rumor. And it stayed that way after the occupation and when the National Park Service were bringing guests here. And then they began filming the 1996 blockbuster, The Rock. And Jerry Bruckheimer and Michael Bay were like, hey, we heard that there's tunnels on the island. Can we get a tunnel for our movie? And the Rangers were like, yeah, but it's all like blocked up and it's old and there's spiders and it's not great. And then they asked, how much money do you need to get this ready and prepared? And they're like, 30,000? And they're like, here's the check, let's go. And they did film a scene of Nichols Cage chasing a terrorist through this tunnel, but they did not use it. So it wasn't even on the deleted scenes. But we have the tunnel now, so we can show you this really cool piece of history. So I do have to warn you, it is going to smell a little bit. It's right next to a nesting place for, what are the birds? Cormorants. And they are a smelly, smelly bird. I'm very sorry. All right. Also, if you are taller than me, you are going to have to kind of bend a little bit so you don't hurt your head. All right, let me turn on the lights and then we can head on in.
Oh, I feel like I'm in a horror movie. Excuse me, Saw vibe. Right?
All right, you guys can wander about for a minute, take your photos,
pictures.
look through.
Paramount Pictures. Slow-mo videos. The spider web. I'm sorry.
Alright, so this building is the New Industries Building. It is called the New Industries Building because it was not the original building where the federal inmates were sent to work. That original building we will see when we leave. We will not be able to go in because it is condemned. There are some things that used to be on the third floor that are now on the first. Cannot go in there. We'll be able to take a look. But the thing about the Model Industries Building, it was built in the 1890s for minimum security military prisoners, and then when they put federal men in there, they had a tendency to escape, and they killed a correctional officer in one of these escape attacks. The warden realized not the best place to have, super maximum security men. They built the New Industries Building. Now, the New Industries Building is not like the Model Industries Building. The Model Industries Building is shaped in an L, so there's corners. Not this building. This building is just one long building. And it's 2 floors. But when correctional officers were on the floor with the men, they were not allowed to have any guns, any weapons, or any keys on them. Just a whistle. So, they built this. The guard gallery. An overlook where the guards could see everything, but they could also be armed. So in case the riot did start, the correctional officers could get their gun, break the glass, drop that gun. That was the riot policy here at Alcatraz was, if men started rioting, you get your gun, you break the glass. If that did not stop the men from rioting, you wrapped your gun. That typically made everyone stop what they were doing. But if it did not, you would then fire into the crowd. We never got to that point here in Alcatraz because by the time the men had wrapped their guns, all the incarcerated men stopped rioting. They just wanted their point to be heard. They did not want the consequences, because that is a deadly consequence. But this building down here is where they did laundry. Now Alcatraz did all the laundry for all the military installments across the Bay Area. It started when it was a military prison, and they kept going with it when it was federal, especially once World War II hit. It became very, very busy. And the men who worked here in the industries building, since they were doing war effort work, they were getting paid 12 cents an hour, but it was still being paid. Now Alcatraz didn't have a commissary, so they could not spend any of that money, but if you had family on the outside, you could send it to them to make them a little bit more comfortable. But the industries building was kind of the heart of the island. And then after the island shut down, then many people came here during the occupation, including the International Workers of the World, which is their IWW right there. So people managed to hang out here during the occupation. And then they filmed movies here. Malpasa Productions right there, Escape from Alcatraz. This was the green room for that movie. So Clint Eastwood hung out around here. They also left us this bench. Thank you so much for the bench. We don't really use it. But also, in The Rock, Nick Cage fights a terrorist right here. And then he runs out those doors to alert the planes coming in that are just about to drop a bomb on the island to not blow it up. So Nick Cage saves the day. Really cool. So if you want to take a couple more photos, look around. And then I'm going to head through this tunnel, and you can meet me through there once you're done. Carly will be the last person.
It's not tall people friendly.
No, it's not.
At the beginning is.
Yeah.
And it's like, no.
Perfect. But there was a gentleman here who was incarcerated during federal years. His name was Bob Luke. He had 2 first names. Mm-hmm. But he worked in the laundry, and he came back to look around the island. They showed him the tunnel, and he was like, well, if I had known about it then, I would probably still be incarcerated.
Oh, no.
First behind the scenes. Was it cool?
Yeah.
Alright. So that is the Model Industries building, as you can see, shaped like an L. And then this is the top of the building that we're in this today. So as you can see, this building right here is right on the water, and many men use that to their advantage, including 2 men named Ralph Rowe and Theodore Cole. Now these 2 men were bank robbers in the early 1920s and the late 1930s, or late 1920s, early 1930s, and they were pretty good at it until they got arrested and sent to federal prison. And then they decided they did not like being in federal prison, so they escaped, went on the run, robbed a couple more banks, got arrested again, and were sent here to Alcatraz. Because when Alcatraz first opened in the 1930s, it was to hold the worst of the worst. The Al Capones, machine gun Kellys, but also those dudes who would not stay put in regular facilities on the mainland. Ralph Rowe and Theodore Cole qualified. And every single man here at Alcatraz had to work once you got here. and the two men were sent to work here at the Model Industries building, and they were on the bottom floor. Now, what can you notice about the Model Industries building?
A lot of big windows.
A lot of big windows. Can you frickin' figure out something else about the windows?
Very big.
There are no bars on those windows. And Ralph Rowe and Theodore Cole found a supply closet with a big window, and they realized that if you put enough pressure on it with a piece of twine covered in a corrosive material, you can start cutting your way through the bars. So that's what they did. They took a piece of twine, they covered it in a corrosive material, and started sawing through the bars. Now they could only work minutes at a time because here at Alcatraz there was one correctional officer for every 3 men. So every move you made, every step you took, they were watching you. So they would sneak away, saw through the bars, go back to work, sneak away, saw through the bars, go back to work, and it took them months, the two of them. And then they were almost through, and they're like, okay, we need to wait for the perfect cover. And the perfect cover came on December 16th, 1937, when, according to the lighthouse keeper, there was a fog so thick that bay traffic was at a complete standstill. No one was coming in, no one was going out, and if you were out on the bay, you were anchored. So very much like today. And so Ralph Rowe and Theodore Cole and all the other men here at Alcatraz were sent to work in these low visibility conditions. And Ralph Rowe and Theodore Cole gave each other that high sign, like, hey, today's the day, we're not spending another night here at Alcatraz. So they went to work, they stayed at their positions for a couple of hours, and then they snuck away. They finished getting through the windows. They got underneath the fence, down the cliff, into the water. How we know all this is because this man was watching them. His name was Alvin Creepy Carpus. He was former public enemy #1, and he was working top floor. And he was working next to a window. And he got a little bored, and he looked down, and he said, oh, I have to see how this ends. And he recognizes that it's Rowe and Cole, and he sees them get into the water, and he sees that they're starting to struggle in the water. And that's when Carpus remembers that Ralph Rowe did not know how to swim.
Oh.
And here he was trying to escape a prison island via swimming. And he's watching them, but his visibility is getting worse and worse and worse as the fog is slowly coming around these two men until finally he cannot see them anymore. And that is when the alarm sirens go off, letting everybody in the vicinity know that there were some escapees from Alcatraz. Now, do y'all think they made it over to the other side?
No.
We are not sure what happened to them. They are listed as missing from Alcatraz. The Bay never gave up her secrets on that one. May they rest in peace. Because it was in 1937. They were in their 20s. At this point, even if they did survive, they are no longer with us. Unless they found the fountain of eternal youth. So, one can only hope. Alright. Oh, also behind us, this is where one of the batteries was. As you can see that red brick poking through. Again, layers of history everywhere you look.
That's cool. Alcatraz was open. Did they ever like go up there and watch people from up there?
No, but we've had guard towers all over. But people went out there regularly because, again, there's no fresh water on Alcatraz, so they had to bring it over on the boat weekly.
Okay.
So this was filled up
Okay.
regularly. So there were men up there, but they had better vantage points in specific locations. So.
What's up those? Those stairs are hella cool though. Where are all the birds?
So behind me is that building that we guys saw on the dock, the apartments for the correctional officers and their families. Now, if you were a correctional officer, would you want your family living out here on the island?
No.
Well, you knew where everybody was, and they were locked up. So the people who lived here, they actually really enjoyed living on the island. They got prorated rent, so it was cheaper. They had 12 boats a day that would take them to San Francisco. You didn't lock your door, because again, everybody else is under lock and key. Kids got to run around the island, have some fun, and you got a great view when it wasn't foggy. So most of the people actually lived here on the island. They like to refer to it as San Francisco's first gated community. But we have stories of children who grew up here on the island. This one woman, her name is Jolene Babiak. Her father eventually would become the last associate warden of Alcatraz. But she lived in these apartments right here, and she has a couple of stories of her interacting with those incarcerated men. The first story she tells is that one day she and her friends were playing out here behind the gates, and the correctional officers had brought down the gardeners to do their gardening work. And they were trimming the hedges and doing whatever they needed to do, and they found a baseball. And one of them says, "Can I give this baseball back to the kids?" And the correctional officer says, "Yeah, okay." And he walks on over and he slips it through and gives it to Jolene, and she smiles and waves and says thank you, and then goes back and playing. And then another story she tells, which is my favorite one, is that here on the island there were a couple of rules that the families had to follow. Men, they had to dispose of their razors into the bay directly, because if the incarcerated men managed to get a hold of those razors, because they were the garbage collectors here on the island, that could not end well. Also, they did not have EPA regulations at the time. You could just dump whatever you wanted in the bay. Alcatraz dumped all of its waste directly into the bay, which is part of the reason why it closed. But also, the kids were not allowed to play with fake guns, and they were not allowed to play like cops and robbers. And so one day the kids made popsicle stick guns, because they're kids, and of course they are. And so they're running around playing cops and robbers with the popsicle stick guns, and the trash truck comes around. There's a correctional officer driving it, and there's 2 inmates on the back. And the correctional officer stops right here, and he says, "Kids, you know you're not supposed to have the guns. Throw them over the fence." And so they all do the, "Oh, okay," and they throw them over the fence, and they're all kind of disappointed. And when the correctional officer comes and he picks, the inmate comes and he picks us up and he throws them in the back. And the correctional officer says, "Okay, no more guns." And he starts the truck and he starts turning around, and as he's starting to go up, the inmate looks around, grabs the guns, and throws them back over the fence. You know, kids are gonna be kids, and so that's one of the fun stories Jolene likes to tell. She's now an author. She writes books on Alcatraz. They're very good. We have them in our store, which is going to be open in the cell house when we get you guys up there. All right, so we have a couple of options. We are going to go up. We're going to go up and around, and I'm going to give you guys about 10 minutes to like take pictures, use the restroom, things like that. But when we convene, where I tell us to convene, I'm going to ask you guys what you guys want to do next, which is more time in the dungeon or more time in the chapel, which is also connected to the guards' break room. So think amongst yourselves. When we get up there, you after a little break, let me know. We'll do like a vote. Sound good?
Got a question for you.
Yeah.
How are the kids educated?
Oh, so the kids were placed on a boat in the morning, brought over to San Francisco, put into the public school system, and then at 3 o'clock they were boated back over. Yeah. They, during the military era, they had a schoolhouse at the beginning, but then it just grew to more and more kids. And they're like, we can't educate all of you. Public school. I mean, you could go to any of the schools in San Francisco, but everyone was just like, there's a public school like right there near Ghirardelli called Galileo. And it has a middle school, an elementary school, and a high school. So they were like, yeah, we're just going to have you all go there because you can walk from the boat. Very simple. All right. So we're gonna head up. That's pretty. So this is what we call Eagle Plaza. Eagle Plaza. This is the site of the first lighthouse on the West Coast. This is not the first lighthouse on the West Coast. When they built the sail house, they realized that the original lighthouse was too short, did not reach around over the sail house, so they had to demolish the first one and build the second first one, which is this one. So it's lovely. We did just get it fixed, so if you're here at night, you will be able to see the lights going. It's really cool. But this is the way that the correctional officers, the warden, and anyone who was coming to visit a family member incarcerated here at Alcatraz would enter. And my favorite fun fact about this eagle, so typically when you're looking at the United States eagle, it's looking to the right, which is, symbolizing that, justice and freedom and hope. Here at most U.S. prisons, at all federal prisons, it's looking to the left to let everyone know that justice has left this place. They are no longer free. However, the occupation, they wrote free because the occupation had a very different message to it than Alcatraz itself. And I will talk about that once we get inside and get you guys upstairs. We're going to be out of the cold for the rest of the time. Alright, this is where I'm going to need to see green stickers. Green stickers. If you do not have a green sticker, do not come up here.
Oh my god, Taylor, even the doors are short for you.
So we are in what was the prison chapel. Here at Alcatraz, there are only 3 services you could attend. You could attend a Catholic fast, a Protestant service, or they have a rabbi come in and do Jewish services once a week. Now, if you look out through these windows, there are no bars on these windows. This is the only place where the incarcerated men could look out freely upon San Francisco when it was there. It normally is. I promise you it's there. It's just very foggy. Let me show you this photo. So they had the services here, and only inmates in good standing were allowed to come to services. Because after the services, they would pull down a projector and they would play movies here as well. Typically only Shirley Temple movies, because the chaplains picked out the movies. There were no noir, no crime thrillers. They did not think that those would put the inmates in the right state of mind. But the chaplains here at Alcatraz were very highly respected men. They were very well respected. And they were allowed to freely walk and talk amongst the men in the recreation yard, in the cell house, in the industries building, and they counseled people as well. So the paintings behind me were painted by a man named J.P. Chase. He was the right-hand man of a gangster known as George Babyface Nelson. And J.P. Chase's job was to sit in the back seat of the car and shoot at people who were coming after them. And J.P. Chase shot and killed an FBI agent, which gave you a really long, really hefty federal time. Now, J.P. was originally from Marin, over on the other side, of the bay. And so what he would do during his rec time is he would go out to the recreation yard and he would just sit and he would look out at the city. And then when they would be brought back into their cells for their recreation time in their cells, he would paint these by memory. So if you knew the San Francisco city skyline, you can tell that it's a little off. But these were all done from memory. And the chaplains also encouraged him to submit these into art contests out in the free world, which he did. I do not know the results. It was something lost to time. But he did sign the photo here, out of this boat, heading back towards Marin, where his family still lived. So this is a place of peace, and it continued to be a place of peace during the occupation. And we do have some political writings here. So today is actually a very important day for the Indians of all tribes, because today in Canada is the Truth and Reconciliation Day. It is honoring the children who did not survive and those who did survive the residential boarding school system, both here and in the United States and in Canada. They have found over 20,000 remains of Indigenous children at these various sites. And the Indians of all tribes, again with a lot of other Indigenous nations and Indigenous groups, are working very hard to bring all of these children back home to their families. But the occupation was very big because, and very important because in the 1960s, the United States government were closing or thinking about shutting down the reservation system, relocating all of the people who lived on those reservations away from their land and into cities where they could integrate. And they were also thinking about shutting down the Bureau of Indian Affairs in the United States government. They did not want, the Indigenous people did not want this to happen. And so they decided that they needed to take a stance. Now, how many treaties do you think the United States has honored between them and the Indigenous people of this country? 0. No treaty has been honored between the Indigenous people of the United States of America and the United States government. And so the Indigenous people in the 1960s knew that. So they called upon the Treaty of Fort Laramie. Now the Treaty of Fort Laramie states that any surplus government land needed to be handed back over to the Indigenous tribes of the area. Alcatraz was surplus government land. They were going to sell it for $2.5 million to the man who invented the Super Bowl for cash so he could build a Victorian-era themed shopping mall out here on the island. The Indigenous people came out here in November of 1969 and held this island for 19 months. And they wrote, this is one of the very famous photos of the teepee in front of San Francisco. I'm going to pass that around. They wrote a treaty, or they wrote a proclamation. In the name of all Indians, we reclaim this island for our Indian nations. We feel this claim is just and proper, and that the land should rightfully be granted to us for as long as the rivers run and the sun shall shine. We hold the rock. In exchange for the island, we offer $24 in glass beads and red cloth, which was a precedent set by the white man's purchase of a similar island 3 centuries earlier. While we note that $24 for the 16 acres of Alcatraz was more than what the whites paid for Manhattan Island, we acknowledge that land values have risen over the years. That was just part of this proclamation. Here is the whole proclamation. Again, I guess I can just pass that around. But the occupation was being led by a man named Richard Oakes. Richard Oakes was very charismatic, and he led the occupation for about the first year that it was running. And at the time, it garnered a lot of media attention and got a lot of support from not only the residents in San Francisco, but also celebrities, including Jane Fonda, who donated a generator, Marlon Brando, Dick Gregory, and the band Clarence Clearwater Survival donated a boat so that the occupiers could get from Alcatraz to San Francisco to pick up supplies and come back. But then Richard Oakes's youngest child fell from one of the old balconies and she died. And Richard Oakes and his family decided to leave the island because they needed to grieve with their family and in quiet and in solace. And that is when more people decided to say that they were the leaders. It started some infighting and eventually led to most of the occupiers returning home. At the time, there were a lot of other people coming out here to the island because during the occupation, Indians of all tribes let anybody who wanted to come out to the island come on out. And so there, one night, an arson fire was started. Now everyone's pointing fingers and saying that they didn't do it, these other people did. So we do not know who actually started these arson fires, but it affected the officers' club, which we saw, the warden's home, and the lighthouse keeper's home that was originally out in this Eagle Plaza area. That was officially the end of the end for the occupation, and the 11 people remaining on the island were brought back to San Francisco, removed from the island by federal marshals. That happened in 1971, but that is what gave the National Park Service the idea of taking over Alcatraz and making it a national park and opening it up to visitors, because they had had so many visitors on the island during the occupation. So without the occupation, we would not have Alcatraz National Park today. It's very, very interesting. So again, if you want to take a look at the notes, feel free. All right, so you have enough time to think about what you guys want to do. So if you guys want to spend some extra time in the dungeon, raise a hand. Looks like the ayes have it. All right. We're going to go back down in the entrance.
Oh my god, I'm gonna trip. Oh, there's light. Okay. Oh my god, this looks hella cool. Where's 181? 181, that's Alcatraz. That cuts to the other side.
Now, look up here, you can see that we kind of can show you the mechanism. But in here, you have a whole set. So, there was a lever where you would select which cell you wanted to open. You grab the clutch. Then you would grab the hammer. Each cell door about 3,000 pounds. And as you can see, you can control, I cannot open all of the cell doors in this row, but you control the first 12 or 13 cell doors on each side. You can open them all at a time, you can open every other, but it's very safe for the correctional officers because you could be here and you can see which cell doors are open because the insides are painted red. Very interesting system. And so to close it again, you would select the right cell door, you'd grab this, the clutch, and it's very easy for those working it. Just up and down. Not too bad. So I'll keep doing that a couple of times if you guys want to watch it from there or watch it from over here. So these cell door sounds have been used in Jurassic Park. The sound of Jurassic Park opening up. There's also the sound of the cell doors on the Death Star, which is pretty cool. Lucas, the arts is again right across the bay in the Presidio, so they would come out here and record the sounds of the cell doors opening and closing for their movies. All right.
There are no beds, like no cots.
Oh no! So once they shut down, they took everything that they could to sell.
Oh.
So what was left behind are movie props. We do have cells set up to look like they were back in the days, including the escape cells. But those are going to be on the audio tour with your audio guide. Here, Mickey. All right. Close that up. And let's get into the Citadel.
So those are like seats in there?
Yes. So you had a little table where you could do schoolwork, do puzzles.
So, but they had actual beds?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the cells set up is right there.
Oh, I like the staircase.
All right. Again, this is a green sticker.
Not the sheriff little cutout. That's cool. Oh, look at that.
It smells musty down there, the torture cage.
Oh.
All right, so this is a lock, and it still has the old military-era cell door. Doors have to be opened individually with a separate key for every single one. And if a man was having a particularly bad day and wanted to escape, and he would stay on the second or the third tier, and a correctional officer had to come in front of your cell to open the door, if you kicked hard enough, that cell door would hit the man, open up, and he would come careening over. It was not safe. And when the BOP took over, they deemed it a hazard, and that's when they built the cell doors that we saw in the cell house. Now, the thing about the military-era cells. So, in World War I, there was a draft. And the men who did not want to be drafted or refused to work, people who did not want to fight for the U.S. Military, if they were, if the war was against a religion such as the Amish, the Hutterites, or the Mennonites, they were still drafted. They were still considered military men, so when they refused to muster, they would not be sent to regular jail or a prison. They would be sent here to a military prison. They'd be put in their cells, and they would be told, put on this uniform. If they refused to put on their uniform, and they say, you need to work. And then they would refuse to work. So they would handcuff them to their cells, like this, and have them stay there for 8 to 12 hours. They would let them off at the end of the day, let them sleep, and the next morning, will you work? And if they said no, they would handcuff them again. And if they still continued saying no, they would put you into what was called a torture cage. Now this is 12 by 32. And they put it, we have a diagram, but they would put it into your cell and they would lock you in. There is just enough room for me to wiggle and bend, but for a full-grown man, you wouldn't be able to. There is no way for you to get relief. And you would have to stand in this for 8 to 12 hours, at attention the entire time. This would go on for a couple of days, and if you continue to refuse going to work, they put you in solitary dark cells underneath the prison. Now, those dark cells were not originally dark cells. Originally, when they built the fort up here on top of the island, it was a 3-story military fort with a dry moat around, and that first floor inside the dry moat. And the cells were built into the dry moat. They were built to hold wood, coal, supplies, extra rations, things like that. But once they decided to build the prison on top of the fort, they demolished the top 2 floors and built the cell house on top, leaving the bottom floor and those supply storage areas vacant. And then they realized that if they put a wall up and put a cell door on, they could do solitary confinement down here. Now, the men would be put down here in solitary confinement for 14 days. They would be given a bucket of water, and sometimes they were given a bucket for their waist. And in the complete darkness, it was very easy to mistake which one was which. They also gave you a diet of 4 pieces of bread per day, and they would very often not give you a blanket. So 14 days, the correctional officers or the guards would come down, they would bring you up, and immediately you would get taken to the doctor. And the doctors would take care of you, bring you back to health. But they say their conditions when they got out of the solitary was not due to the conditions in solitary, it was due to their high-carb diet. So let's cut those 4 pieces of bread down to 2. And if you still refuse to do work, you're put down for another 14 days after 14 days up in the hospital. It typically took 2 trips to solitary for men to break and start doing military work. Now, when the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Prisons took over, they were told, do not use the dark cells in solitary underneath the prison. But if you do, let us know. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And the warden had a very strict no-talking policy for the first 4 years that Alcatraz was running as a federal institution. So if you got out of your cell in the morning and you said good morning, you would be placed down in solitary. But they changed the amount of days you could be down there. They changed you from 14 to 19. And instead of being out for an equal amount of time, you'd be given a shower and a real meal and thrown back down for another 19 days until the warden decided you had learned your lesson, or if you decided to relent. Eventually, a man named Henry Young would be kept down there. He would then be brought back into general population where he would kill a man. And when they went to court, he argued that the reason why he killed this man is because he went crazy because of his treatment down in solitary. Then this got out to the major news corporations, it got very big, and they decided that it was a crime and torture for men to be kept in solitary confinement in the dark cells underground. That is when Alcatraz was given the money to build D Block with 4 dark cells, because it's just inhumane when it's underground. All right, so we are going to go down underneath. You do not have to go down if you do not want to. This is
Why
voluntary.
wouldn't you want to go down?
I understand some people do not like caves, some people do not like small dark spaces. But if you do decide to go down, I'm going to ask you to follow a couple of housekeeping rules. First, the stairs are not OSHA compliant. What is OSHA compliant? The railing. Please use this railing. Also, all the paint and all the walls are covered in a fine layer of lead paint. Please do not lean on the walls, touch the walls, lick the walls, interact with the walls in any way, shape, or form. There are also writings on the walls that we want to preserve for tomorrow and then the day after. So just photos, you can use flashlights. Let me check the time, let's see what we can do. 6 o'clock on the dot, perfect, we have enough time. So I will decide down there if we have enough helmets, then we can do the whole thing. All right, because if there are not helmets, then I can't let you go into the whole thing. That is also an OSHA thing. So, but let me go down first. I will turn on the light.
I know, Osha.
And if you do not want to stay, if you want to stay up, we do have a video available of underground.
Oh my god. This looks so scary. Why does it kind of smell fresh down here?
Please put on a helmet. You have to put on the helmet to see the whole of the Citadel. All right, you guys can just go down into the bottom, take a look at the first floor. Do not go down any hallways. We're just going to wait for everyone to come on down.
That's hella cool.
Perfect. All right, please put on a helmet so we can explore. And here we have our first 4 cells. Now, as you can see, if you get a flashlight and look real close, there are numbers carved into the walls. These are men's numbers. They carved them down with buttons, their fingernails, anything they really had. No men died down here. No men died down here. Just a blanket statement. All right, so if you guys want to partake, I can do a dark cell demonstration to show you how dark it really was down here. So if you want to, we can have everyone get into these first 4 cells.
Sorry. It's okay.
Yes. All right.
Inmates, guys.
Alright, so I am going to ask you guys to do a couple of things for me. First, please turn off any phones, any devices that can be used that have light in them. We want to try to get the full experience of what's going on down here. Also, I do want to stress this for y'all. What these men experienced down here was torture, and because of the experiences of these men, we are classified as an international site of conscience. We want to be as respectful to these men's memories as we possibly can. It's going to be off for a couple of seconds. I'm going to read you guys a quote from a man who was kept down here. His name was Philip Grosser. All right, I understand. I have laughed at a funeral before, but just, try to be as respectful as I can. All right, ready? All right, I'll do a 3, 2, 1, 4.
I was thinking of dungeon. This is different.
I thought there would be like actual doors.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
Oh my god.
We're to walk through the block floor and across this house under A block. There appear to be 4 or 5 cells with the old-time flat bar, as was an A block itself. None of the cells had toilet, water, sink, bed, or anything save a slop bucket, which they did not empty. They gave us 3 slices of bread each morning, then every 4th day we got a small bowl of water and tomato soup. The doctor came down every morning to see if there were complaints. Every morning and evening, the guards would give us a drink of water. We wore slippers and coveralls, which we slept in since there was no blanket. The floor appeared to be rock or cement. We got fed up, and since they did dump the slop buckets, we threw the contents out into the corridor and started to urinate in the bar. No guards were stationed in the dungeon. We were down there 14 days. Come back to the block. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. All right, there's 17 of us. You ready to go exploring?
Yeah.
All right. We're going to come back through.
No, we're going this way. Come over here.
The outside of the dram boat. Also, again, if you are shorter than me or taller than me, you are going to need to duck because our earthquake retrofittings have made some very short ceilings. But again, if there was an earthquake, this is probably the safest place in the entire Bay Area. All right, and these are the steps that would go up to D block.
Oh.
All right. Wait for everybody. I'm going to tell you the significance of this set. All right, so the fear in the federal years was that you would be brought down into the Citadel through the D block stairs. And then when you had learned your lesson, you're being brought back in the general population, you would be brought up the stairs that we went up and down. So to the men, it was like you had disappeared. You never came back up. And one of the men that was brought down here was a man named Leo McIntosh. He was here during the federal years, and he broke the rule of no talking. He was down here the 7th of September and the 8th of September, 1934. He was down here for 17 days until he finally called out that he relented, he would follow the rules, and he was brought back up into general population. But it's very intense when you look at it, because it says days. And you just think of all the other men who were down here and the horrible treatment that they suffered. Complete and total darkness that you guys just experienced. You didn't know if there was another person down here, because one of them in one of the notes said that you couldn't trust your own mind. Because if you called out and there was someone down here, maybe you just made it up. It's kind of heavy. But also, someone with my name wrote their name right here, probably in the 70s, when they were down here during the occupation. And the smoke writing that you see up here, that was also during the occupation. And there was a much different feel on the island at that time. There's a feel of hope, there's a feel of joy. So this island has meant many different things for many different people throughout the years.
I have a question. Like, was there any woman incarcerated?
No. This was just a men. It was men only. No women correctional officers. There was one woman nurse at one point, and she was treated so well. The rule in the cell house was you did what she told you, and if you made her feel uncomfortable, you would have to face the wrath of the prison. This was the only woman some of these men saw for years, because some of the men did not get visitors regularly. They didn't have wives, and their families didn't visit them. So she was treated very, very well. But she was the only only woman who ever worked in the cell house.
Do you know how they did the smoke writing?
Yes, so the smoke writing, they typically would take a lighter and they just hold it up very, very close, and they would kind of just write or make pictures, whatever they want. All right, so we're gonna go back down to the other side. We're gonna go through the Citadel itself. Feel free to branch off into some of these rooms. So who was down here were the lowest ranking officers and the laundresses. And you can still see fireplaces that were here. And you can see where there used to be stairs. There you go. Very cool, very cool. Then we have more rooms. And then right here, I call this the room that now leads to nowhere because of earthquake retrofitting. Alright, but as we wait for everyone, you can go explore the cells again. Take a little, in the third one, there's a man who was here in 1887. His name is Albert Anderson, and he was from Melbourne, Australia.
The one that we were in. Oh yeah, you can see there.
There is a statue.
Huh?
Yes. Yeah. And we have some great examples of it right over here, in these three ones. And then this one we have Freak Freely, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
You know, the 60s, man. These would have been for lowest ranked officers or washerwomen, or basically the lowest people on the totem pole when they were operating after that.
Some steep steps, bro. Like, my little legs can only go so far.
Alright. Head on out into this little area. We have some benches. Altogether, there are 536 cells in Alcatraz, but they did not like to keep it at capacity, so they kept it about 200 to 90 men here at one time. They wanted there to be extra space just in case. So what we're standing in was the barber shop. There was a barber for the white prisoners and there was a barber for the black prisoners. And originally they used long barber shears. But one day, a gentleman who you're going to meet on your audio tour, his name is George D. Vincenzi, he's the bottom left. He was a correctional officer here on the island, and his first day working in the cell house was haircut day. And they thought it would be very easy, very chill, because every single man got a haircut, and it would help George familiarize him with the gentleman he would be watching. Except for it did not turn out to be a very easy day, because the two gentlemen, the barber and the man getting his haircut, got into a fight, and the barber took his long shears and stabbed them into the man's chest. The man staggered up, he was then slammed into this gate, and then the barber cradled his friend, brought him down to the ground, said, "I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me," kissed him on the forehead, and then he was brought to D Block, while the man who was stabbed was brought to the hospital where we're going to be going next. Unfortunately, that man did not live. And George got slashed, his brand new pants ruined. He was very upset about that, which is a funny thing to be upset about. But there we go. All right. Also, as we walk past, take a look at the open cell on the second floor. This was Al Capone's cell while he was here. Al Capone did not spend a lot of time in this cell. He spent most of his time up in the hospital where we're going next. But do take a look at cell 181, with where Mr. Capone. All right, already going to turn down. Call me second. Head on up, wait in front of the gate for me.
There's an elevator.
So here we are in the operating room of the Alcatraz Hospital. Now, when you were sentenced to time here at Alcatraz, you only had 4 rights remaining to you: food, clothing, shelter, medical. And the food needed to be the best in the entire prison system so that they could ward off hunger strikes. And 2, the medical needed to be the top of the line, best of the best medical you could ever receive, because everything had to be done in-house. You could not take the med over to San Francisco, because that is a huge security risk. So, here in the hospital, they had a dentist's office. the dentists would come twice a week sometimes. But if you were having a dental emergency when the dentists were out here, the correctional officers would pull that tooth for you. As someone who just got all 4 wisdom teeth taken out, that does not seem like a fun time. It was not fun even with anesthetic and a dentist there. With a correctional officer just going, stop it over. Does not seem like best of best. This is the operating room in the 1930s. And they also had an x-ray machine. We will be able to go take a look at the room where the x-ray machine was held. Again, after Alcatraz closed, they basically sold everything that they could get their hands on for money, so everything here is a movie home. But I'm going to tell you just how good the Alcatraz medical system was. So, in the 1950s, there's a gentleman here named Daniel Contreras. This is what he looked like. This was his mugshot that was taken here at Alcatraz. Now, Daniel Contreras worked in the kitchen. He made food. Daniel Contreras was also a man who did not get along well with others. And so one day, he got in a fight with the other men working in the kitchen, and they beat him over the head with this lead pipe. Now the images I'm about to show you are official crime scene photos, and they do involve some blood. When Daniel Contreras did not return to the cell count, the correctional officers knew something was wrong. They went and they found him and pooled his own blood. This was him before they shaved his head. This was him after they shaved his head. They then managed to get him up here, where they then did brain surgery on Mr. Contreras. And Mr. Contreras survived. He lived. But he was not the same person. This would be him after the surgery. He essentially had the mind of a child after that, and Alcatraz realized that they could no longer suitably care for him, and he was sent to a medical institution in Illinois. He eventually would be released into the care of his family, and he would die with his family many years later. But that is just how good the medical system was here at Alcatraz. He managed to do brain surgery in the 50s, and he lived. All right. So you guys can now explore the hospital. We're going to meet Al at the very end. And we're going to go over a couple of, not a couple of, we're going to go over a couple of other people who are out here in the hospital. Then we're going to finish it out. We're going to tell you all about the night tour, and we're going to head down. Sound like they're all abandoned. I know I can.
Looks like a bathroom. Hydrotherapy. Oh, that's hella cool. I'm guessing this is where you'd go after being treated.
Yeah.
Not the rock, not the chair. Little bar moment. Is there water in the toilet? No. I want to know how these worked.
They probably have.
Oh, like buttons maybe?
they were recovering from surgery, if they were recovering from an illness. And originally, the walls and bars were not here. They were placed here in 1952. In 1952, Alcatraz got a new warden, and every time a new warden was appointed to Alcatraz, he completely redid the entire cell house, changed all the cell numbers, he changed everything about it, so it would fit his perfect idea of what Alcatraz should be. So at one point, it was just one long ward with many, many beds, and that was what it would look like when Al Capone was kept up here. Al Capone was only here at Alcatraz for 4 years, but by the time he reached Alcatraz, he was no longer Mr. Capone. He was a gentleman who had had syphilis for so long, it had completely destroyed his brain. And they realized that Al Capone was more of a danger to himself and to others, so they could not keep him in his cell for very often, so he spent most of his time up here in the hospital. Another person who was kept up here in the hospital for a large amount of time was the Birdman. The Birdman spent 8 years in solitary by himself, and then he spent 11 years here in the hospital, in his own cell right there. I would go into more detail, but I have a coworker who's going to be giving a presentation all about the Birdman later this evening, so I want y'all to go to that because it is going to be a really great event. So, but when they did build the walls and the bars, you could fit 3 to 4 beds in, 3 to 4 men. However, they like to keep 1 man per cell because if you put 2 men together, they're going to talk about escape, and of course, that's bad for business. Can't have that. All right. This is also the site of some filming locations. So if you've seen The Rock, this is where the command center is. And you can see up here there's some glass caps where they did some explosions. There's another one right here. And if you look up, I have been told by all the rangers that this is fake blood, not blood. Because in the movie, there was a shootout, there was a lot of blood spray, they did, there we go. Hollywood magic. So, really cool if you're really a fan of those movies. Alright, so that is it for me. Thank you guys so much for spending the last 2 hours with me, and you guys hope you really enjoyed it. I'm going to tell you all about the fun things we have planned for you down in the South House. So we're going to go downstairs and you're going to get your South House audio tour. It's about 30 minutes long. It comes in 11 different languages, and you're going to hear from 8 different men, 4 of whom were correctional officers and 4 of whom were incarcerated here on the island. It's their own stories in their own voices. It's very powerful. 10 out of 10 would recommend. After you're done with your South House audio tour, you're going to hand back your players in the dining hall, and then you're going to head downstairs where we have a couple of options for you. Our first option is a brand new exhibit called The Big Lockup, which explores mass incarceration in the United States from 1963 until today. We did just win an award from it from the National Park Service, so I definitely recommend that y'all go check that out. After your Big Lockup exhibit, we have our store. And in our store, there will also be a list of all of our programs and presentations going on and what time the boats will be leaving.
The last stop of your tour. So once you're done with your audio tours, you're gonna turn it in over there. I'm gonna be on that side. So let me tell you all about your audio players. So these are your audio players. You're gonna click that green button to play and click that red button to pause. Throughout your journey, you're gonna keep these in the bags the whole entire time. Try your best not to open them. I know they're very open though on the bottom part, but we're gonna keep it closed today. So everyone, alrighty, yeah. So I guess I'm just gonna move around from this way and just gonna pass them out. And once I'm done passing them out, we're gonna lead you towards the beginning. So my friends over here, you can come on this side. Come on down. All right, and what language do you need your players in? English, all right. To have one English over here.
Sorry, you could. Always so fun.
Now, turn back to the cells. Walk over to the cells on the far right. The solid green. This was solitary confinement. The whole. Cells 9 through 14. So was I, right? The regulation required that the light be on. We kept the lights off when they're ready. Here's my guard. You may enter one of the cells. Got the attention, but in Alcatraz, 30 years history, most days uneventful and stop at the first. They face San Francisco and the setting sun. The yacht club, which was directly across from would always have a big New Year's. I can sit out there in my hotel out there at night time to see the full moon come up. Continue slowly down Broadway past the company toward Times Square. American society. This part of Broadway was a segregated section for black prisoners. Stop when you get to the end of the cell block. Mexicans, Indians, whites, they all sell next to each other. They tried it. They opened up. And they had such a high population of hostile residents, such a low population comparatively of blacks. They soon found out they could.
We have officially completed our tour. And she's throwing it back on the fire hydrant. This don't look right for one. I know.
That was early as fuck for 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Times
Bye,
and have them
Alcatraz.
walk about the vessel and
in my hands I hold the ashes, in my veins black pitch runs, in my chest fire catches in my way. Setting sun, dark clouds gather around me. To the west, my soul's bound, but I will go on ahead free. There's a light yet to be found, the last pale light in the west, the last pale light in the west. And I ask for no redemption in this cold, barren place. Still I see a faint reflection, and so by it got my way. Last pale light in the west.